everybody, Trevor here, and it's time for another top 10 video. In the past, I've made a couple top videos on Thomas villains and Kingdom Hearts villains, and why I like them. Now that we're in the month of October again, we'll be discussing my top 10 Disney villains. Ever since I was an adolescent, I often watched Mickey's House of Villains on DVD every October because it's one of my favorite Halloween specials, and I especially love the musical number where all the villains get together to take over the House of Mouse during Halloween night. Now for this list, I will only be including villains that were created by the Walt Disney Company, so that means no Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel, or any of the other properties that were bought by Disney. And no, King Louie will not be on this list because he's more neutral than bad in the original movie, but eventually turned good in some projects. Now without further ado, let's begin this spooky top 10, shall we? Number 10 is a tie between Prince John and Professor Ragin. Let's talk about Prince John first. He was the main antagonist in Disney's Robin Hood, and all he ever wanted was to take away all the taxes from the poor for himself because he's that greedy. He was originally voiced by the late Peter Ustinov, who was a great actor, by the way. What I like about Prince John is that not only he's a mean, greedy prince who likes to take advantage of his henchmen, including Sir Hiss, but I also enjoy his cowardly side, especially when he sucks his thumb like an infant. Now let's move on to Professor Ragin from The Great Mouse Detective. His master plan was to overthrow the Mouse Queen and take over Mousedom as the new king, and it's up to Basil of Baker Street and his friends to stop him once and for all. In my opinion, when it comes to Disney villains from the Dark Age in general, Ragin would be my favorite of the bunch because he was voiced by the late Vincent Price, and I especially enjoyed his respective musical number, The World's Greatest Criminal Mind. However, the reason both Prince John and Ragin are so low on this list is because their respective films were part of the Disney Dark Age era, where their films weren't as successful as those from when Walt Disney was around. But that doesn't mean that these movies are bad. In fact, Robin Hood and The Great Mouse Detective are two of my favorite ones from that time despite their flaws. Coming at number 9 is Gaston. Gaston was the main antagonist of the 1991 adaptation of Beauty and the Beast, and he was notorious for being a vain, narcissistic jerk who tries to win Belle's affections, and would often pick on her father Maurice by calling him crazy. In all honesty, I enjoyed this character because he's one of those villains who I would love to hate because of his narcissism and showboating. I especially love the fact that the character and his own song were used as an internet meme, which makes him even more interesting. And I'm always a sucker when it comes to memes like this, but I can understand why fans don't like him in the slightest because of these reasons alone. Number 8 is another tie between Maleficent and Corella DeVille. Let's talk about Corella first. She is an excellent, reckless, and fearsome villain who wants to kidnap all the Dalmatian puppies just to skin them for a coat. She even has a cool car, too. She first appeared in the 1961 film 101 Dalmatians, which is a great movie in my opinion, but I also enjoyed the 1996 live-action remake of it because I love seeing real-life puppies on screen. While she was mostly serious and scary with her schemes, she can be over the top in some projects like the 1996 film, for instance, with Glenn Close. And I always enjoy the humorous side when it comes to certain characters. Oh, and I even enjoyed the Corella DeVille song, which was written by Roger in the original film. Now let's talk about Maleficent. She made her first appearance in the 1959 film Sleeping Beauty, and her goal was to kill Aurora because she wasn't invited to the ceremony at the beginning of the film. And like Cruella, she's cruel, mean, and pure evil, and she's one of Disney's most beloved antagonists, which does explain why she's a recurring villain in the Kingdom Hearts series. The reason Corella and Maleficent are a tie too is because, for one thing, they were both voiced by Susan Blakesley in more modern projects such as Mickey's House of Villains, just to name one. Secondly, their respective live-action prequels botched their characters, so instead of making them pure evil like they're supposed to be, they were rewritten as misunderstood and sympathetic anti-heroes, which doesn't really make any sense whatsoever. My point is, sometimes I like to have a villain just for the sake of being evil. For example, look at Big Jack Horner from DreamWorks' Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. He's so evil that he wanted to have all the magic in the world, and he even killed all his henchmen in the process of finding this wishing star. Why can't Disney make villains like that anymore? God, I miss the good old days. Number 7. Captain Hook. While I'm not obsessed with Peter Pan as a kid, mainly because of how the Indians were portrayed in the original, but I still enjoyed his main antagonist, Captain Hook, who wants revenge on Peter and his friends. What I like about Captain Hook is not only he's a mean and unsympathetic pirate captain who likes to take advantage of Mr. Smee and the other pirates on the ship, but like Prince John from Robin Hood, he also has a humorous, cowardly side to him, especially when he's afraid of Tick-Tock the crocodile. It's even more hilarious when you get to fight him in the Kingdom Hearts series. However, I put him as number 7 because, like Maleficent and Cruella, his respective live action reimagining, Peter Pan and Wendy, also botched his character by making him sympathetic, which makes no sense because, as I said earlier, sometimes villains are meant to be evil to begin with. Yeah, most villains nowadays are either twist villains or misunderstood ones, which annoys me because I usually expect better from Disney when it comes to high quality writing and entertainment. Man, this makes me wish I was a kid again, just like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. Number 6. Ursula. Ursula is a sea witch with octopus tentacles who made her first debut in the 1989 classic, The Little Mermaid, where she was banished by King Triton due to her wickedness and manipulated Ariel into giving up her voice in exchange for a pair of legs. I've put her as number 6 because she's one of the most frightening Disney villains of all time. In fact, I used to be very scared of that poor unfortunate soul's musical number because of her witchcraft. Yes, even more so than King Triton's wrath before then. But still, Ursula is an overall cool, cunning, dark, scary, and a really memorable villain. I also think that Pat Carroll did a perfect job with her performance. May she rest in peace, by the way. Number 5. Scar. Scar is the main antagonist in the 1994 huge hit, The Lion King, and his plan was to kill Mufasa and Simba in order to take over the Pride Lands as king, but was soon defeated by an all-grown-up Simba and was basically eaten up by his own hyena clan in the end because they thought he was using them as a means to an end. In my opinion, Scar's a cool villain because of Jeremy Irons' voice for the character, as well as his cunning and cruel personality. I even consider Be Prepared to be one of my favorite Disney villain songs because of him. Though I placed him as number 5 because as much as I enjoyed The Lion King even as a kid, but if Scott were number 1, then it would be too cliched. Number 4. Jafar. Jafar was the evil advisor from the 1992 big hit Aladdin, and his goal was to find the genie's lamp and use it to take over Agrabah. Luckily, his plan soon failed after Aladdin tricked him into becoming a genie and put him in his place in his own black lamp. Like Ursula and Scar, Jafar is also a very frightening villain, and an awesome one at that. He has a pet parrot named Iago, who was one of my favorite villain sidekicks, by the way, because of his voice provided by the late Gilbert Gottfried. I especially found it really cool that Jafar became a cobra during the final battle of the original movie. It's too bad that he didn't become one in the live-action remake. Otherwise, it would have been really cool. When it comes to Jafar's performance, Jonathan Freeman will always be the absolute best voice of the character because he's the first one. No offense to Marwan Kenzari from the 2019 live-action remake. He did a good job too. Oh, and fun fact, did you know that Jonathan Freeman also voiced Tito Swing from Shinetime Station? Yeah, I was surprised when I first found that out. Number 3. Hades. Hades was the main antagonist in the 1997 animated film Hercules and was the Greek god of the dead. His main goal was to kill Hercules by making him mortal and weak and take over Mount Olympus by releasing the Titans. I love Hades because in the movie, he plays both the villain and the comic relief. In other words, he's hilarious, and I especially love James Woods as the character. I also like when every time he gets angry, he flares up. And even though I'm pretty tired of the Hercules world returning numerous times in Kingdom Hearts, I think it's very cool that James Woods always returned to reprise his role because he loves the character. And I don't blame him because he does a really good job. Number 2. Percival C. McLeach. Also known as McLeach for short, he is a poacher from the Australian outback who kidnaps a boy named Cody because he wants to know where Marahute, the giant golden eagle, lives. But Cody refuses to tell him because he wanted the mother eagle and her eggs to be safe from harm. He first appeared in the 1990 animated film The Rescuers Down Under, and it was a sequel to the 1977 hit The Rescuers. He was voiced by the late George C. Scott, who did an excellent job with his voice in my opinion, despite not giving him an Australian accent to begin with. Oh, and he has a really cool bushwhacker, which is one of my favorite villain vehicles in the Disney franchise, along with Cruella's car. Another thing I like about McLeach is that he's cruel, sadistic, and tries to kill both Cody and the Mother Eagle after he captured both of them at the same time, but luckily, they were saved by the rescuers during the climax. And in my opinion, I love The Rescuers Down Under because it's one of those Disney sequels that's criminally underrated. Not only is it better than the first movie in terms of writing and animation, but McLeish is an overall excellent and better looking villain than Medusa, since that character was a ripoff of Cruella de Vil but with orange hair. And furthermore, it's too bad that this sequel bombed at the box office because it's actually a really good movie. I highly recommend that you give it an honest chance. Now, before I get to my number one pick, I just want to give a bunch of honorable mentions. Ka. I know he had a fan following, especially on DeviantArt, but the reason he didn't make it is because in the original novel by Rudyard Kipling, he was portrayed as a good guy rather than the secondary antagonist that we all know and love. Zira. She got beat out by Scar. The evil queen from Snow White. She would have been number 9 for her narcissism, but I find Gaston to be more interesting because of the memes about him. Lady Tremaine and her daughters. They would have been number 8. Chernobog. While he is a frightening villain, but I was kind of scared of his musical segment in the first Fantasia movie because it's exactly like hell. And besides, I like Hades better. Pete. I already explained my thoughts on this character in a previous top 5 video, so I'll provide a link in the description below, just so I don't sound like a broken record. And the number 1 spot is a tie between Shere Khan and Judge Claude Frollo. I decided to put these two as number 1 mainly because they were both voiced by the late Tony Jay, who was an awesome voice actor, by the way. Let's talk about Shere Khan first. In my opinion, he's one of the best Disney villains in history because his goal was to kill Mowgli due to his prejudice against man. And as for Judge Claude Frollo, not only that he manipulated Quasimodo and killed his mother, but his main goal was to kill Esmeralda, as well as trying to commit genocide against all the gypsies in the country. What makes these villains so awesome is because they're both cunning, evil, snooty, and murderous. And like most other Disney villains, we get to know their desires and what their main goals are. Not to mention that they have more character depth than any of the more modern day Disney villains. Also, The Jungle Book is my all-time favorite Disney film. I'll provide a link to my thoughts on it in the description below, just so I don't sound like a broken record. As for The Hunchback of Notre Dame, I used to fear that film as a kid, but as I grew older, I started to appreciate it more because it was one of Disney's darkest films, and it tackles serious subjects like lust, genocide, and religious hypocrisy. Even the songs were fantastic, like Hellfire, which is one of my favorite Disney villain songs, by the way. I might make a top video on that, but not this year because I'm afraid we won't have time. Anyways, let me know your thoughts down below on which of these Disney villains are your favorite. Do you agree with my list, or do you have your own personal preference? And if there's anything I could have elaborated on or added in, which I'm sure there is, then let me know too. Lastly, here's hoping that King Magnifico will be an overall good villain, because I have high hopes for Wish because of him. If not, then we're all doomed. But in all seriousness, I hope Wish does well at the box office this Thanksgiving because I don't want Disney to suffer any more backlash or go out of business. I just want Disney to improve for once because they used to be very good back in the 20th century as well as in the 2000s. Anyways, this is Trevor Davis signing off.